In this video, I am taking the forest scenery that I built last time and finishing it up ready for the gaming table. Hey up me ducks, as we say in the East Midlands. This is Autumn Witch coming at you from a delightfully grey and wet Nottingham. Last time I dragged you along on the slog that was building a table's worth of forest terrain. However, now we have the more enjoyable part of the project. It has colour and everything. I know I'm spoiling you, just wait till I get all oiled up and disagree with a hot glue gun. Let us crack on in a forward motion. Airbrushing. Oi, where are you going? Look, I know airbrushes are something of a turn-off for a lot of people, and I very rarely use it. But for big pieces like these, they are massive time savers. You could do this with dry brushing, but it would take like 75 years, or with rattle cans, but that kind of sacrifices the whole precision that is required. I started by going in with a dark purple. In this case, scale 75 Inktense violet, thinned with airbrush thinner and diluted with water. I know that it may seem decadent to use such high quality inks on a big spray job, but this set of ink is so rich in pigment that a little of it goes further than I do on a first date and half a bottle of Lambrini. That's right, all up the trees and everything. I covered the areas that will be in shadow to give a more interesting shade than just doing so with black. I know instinctively we tend to think of forests as green and brown, but there is a wealth of colour in woodlands, and I feel a purple shadow will evoke that. Don't worry about the brightness of it for now, it will be toned down by later steps. Next I go in with Vallejo Wolf Grey and hit the stone areas. I come in from a high angle to preserve the purple shadows in the recesses. I then come in with some suitably thin scale 75 Inktense chestnut brown. This is more heavily diluted to get a thinner glaze. Finally, I use the airbrush to add some colour to the two pieces that will have water effects. I want to give a hint that the water is deeper than it actually is, so I come in with some scale 75 Inktense green around the edges to give the impression of algae and other such biological blooms. And that's all I'm doing with the airbrush. You may now relax and enjoy the rest of the video. Oil washes. I know, I've been wary of oil washes too, but I thought I'd try them out for scenery. I got myself some black and brown oil paints from Winsor & Newton and a bottle of odourless, non-toxic thinners from Amazon. I mixed the paints in with the thinner to make the wash and quickly realised that these thinners were less use than tits on a fish. Switching to a more traditional, non-odourless and non-toxic white spirit worked a treat. I did various mixes of the two colours, with the browner ones going on the organic and blacker ones going on the stone and rock areas. I quickly got bored of using the brush and resorted to mass squirtage with the pipette. As the washes met, they merged and blended a little to give a nice binding effect to everything that is also very common in nature. When that was done, I came in with some cotton buds and white spirit to reactivate the oils and clear some of them from the brick and stonework to let that original grey come back through, whilst remaining shaded in the recesses. Then all there was left to do was to leave it to dry overnight. Before we crack on with dry brushing, and I do love dry brushing, I just want to take a moment to ask you to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Bleeding Tree Gaming is a channel set up by Nottingham-based hobbyists covering various aspects of the wargaming, tabletop and RPG hobby. We're a small channel at the moment, but your support can help us grow and improve our content. Now, back to the project. Dry brushing. This is my hobby zen. There is a certain meditative quality to it. I come in first with a heavy dry brush of Citadel's Jacaro Orange, where the fallen leaves lay on the ground, followed by another dry brush of Citadel's Elysian Green, but this time more selective to keep the orange more prominent, and I moved to lightly add some of the green to the areas that look like they might gather moss, such as certain rocks and bases of tree trunks. When it came to the stone, I wanted to imply that the buildings were made from locally quarried stone, deciding on Citadel's Fenrisian Grey as a base colour. Having said that, I chose to start on the mausoleum with Citadel's Thunderhawk Blue to give it an older, darker look. I then came in with Fenrisian Grey over that, and the rest of the stone and brickwork was the same process. Yes, I use my desktop as a palette. Don't at me or out, I shall put a mild curse on you. I then went in for a lighter dry brush of Citadel's Oswin Grey, but like most Citadel whites and like greys tend to do when unused for 10 minutes, it had separated and gone manky. I had a pot of Citadel's Rack White dry paint that has sat unused for years and gave that a go. It is a nice off-white, but I felt it was just too bright a highlight. I then switched to Citadel's Ushabti Bone, and that gave the stonework a much more natural looking tone. The next thing I did was I painted the roof of the mausoleum with a Citadel Bronze, followed by a dry brush of Citadel's Screaming Bell. I then came in with Citadel's technical paint Nailac Oxide. When bronze and copper oxidize, unlike iron which turns red, it turns green. I wanted to add some age to it, and this worked out really nicely, I think. I was given these 2 packs of Gorilla 2-part epoxy resin some time ago. I looked them up on Amazon and they are actually quite expensive compared to the other 2-part epoxy packs I've used before. Like a kiss from a rose, I broke the seals, mixed the parts together, thinned it with some acetone, aka nail polish remover, and then added a couple of drops of the Scale 75 Inktense Green and Chestnut Brown. I started with the smaller piece because potentially ruining that was not as bad as potentially ruining the big one, and it poured okay. It took both packs to fill both pieces to a satisfactory level. The ink seemed to have taken and the water has a nice slightly tinted look. Don't go overboard with the inks here, you need to be very sparing, as a little goes a very long way, especially with the Scale 75 Inktense range. To finish, I sprinkled a little of my herbal flocking from the last video around the edges, and chucked in a twig that had snapped off one of the other trees due to me being an utter klutz. In ages past, I heroically liberated a bag of lichen from my dad's shed. It was intended for a model railway that never got finished. I swear it is older than I am. And I am getting old. Anyway, I plucked random chunks and placed them where there wasn't a good place for a mini to stand, so that I didn't block the places where it was good for a mini to stand, and most amusingly, I burnt myself on the glue gun several times. 1 or 2 pieces had warped slightly at the base, and a couple of others had taken damage where the modelling compound had been too thin, but these were easily covered by the bushes. Now I'm using my own herb mix that I used to flock the pieces before they were primed, and now this is going to get to stay its natural green. It gets sealed down with water, PVA and dish soap mixture. That is pretty much all of the terrain finished. Behold my new gaming mat! I got it from a seller on eBay. They seemingly print them to order, and the whole thing with shipping was just £36. It's PVC, so it's far easier to clean than my old neoprene Frostgrave mat, which is, showing its age. And the print detail on this new one is fantastic. I thoroughly recommend it, and I shall even post a link to the eBay seller in the description below. I am so pleased with how it matches the finished terrain, which is quite incredible, as I was already halfway through building this terrain when I actually ordered this mat, and I really just can't wait to have a proper game with it all. And we are done with this build, but not with the forest project. But I think my next video is going to be something a bit more retro and miniatures based. So until then, I shall bid you a hearty ta-ra duck, and leave you with some sexy shots of the finished pieces. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to help the channel grow, and so you don't miss out on future content. And I will catch you beautiful people next time.